Okay, everyone, welcome to the Belgium Startup Conference 2022. My name is Adam. I'm the founder of Startup Network Europe, and it's amazing to see so many people connected right now. Thank you. Very quickly, Startup Network Europe, we make webinars for European startups, which attract thousands of founders and investors. We kicked off in April with the Irish Startup Conference 2021, and then in September and October, we did 4 more events. And last week, we started doing webinars again with the European AI Conference. They've all gotten 1,000 to 1,500 people so far, and it looks like this event will do the same, which is great. Coming up, we have more events like the event today, and other countries will also be included, like Italy, Spain, and France. Our sponsors for today, I just want to say thank you to Amplitude, the digital optimization system. With their trademark behavioral graph innovation, they sort through millions of seemingly random actions to instantly find patterns of customer behavior and predict outcomes and adapt experiences to increase customer engagement, growth, and loyalty. Our second sponsor is Twilio, and Twilio is a cloud communications platform used by millions of startups to engage with billions of customers around the world. Software developers can use Twilio to make and receive phone calls, send and receive text messages, and perform other communication functions using its web service APIs. And especially for people in this conference, Twilio has established the Twilio Startups program, where you can get credits for free, which is a really, really good thing. And then finally, our third sponsor is Freshworks for Startups, which provides integrated software solutions for startups and scale-ups. They are originally from India, now headquartered in California, and they raised more than $1 billion during its IPO last year. And finally, through its startup program, attendees of this conference can claim up to $10,000 in credits, along with access to mentors, resources, and customers. Now, folks, just very quickly, our plan for today is very simple. This is a 90-minute event with 30 different speakers in 90 minutes. They include Belgian Startup Association leaders, Belgium startup founders in Belgium, but also in the United States, Belgian venture capitalists, and international scale-ups. And anyone here who's not from Belgium, I can give you a quick summary of the Belgium startup scene. Belgium essentially is a country of 12 million people, small country, big for me because I'm from Ireland, but it has access to a huge market in the EU of 450 million people. There are at least almost 5,000 verified startups in Belgium, which is huge for a country of its size. And you can see just how much funding has gone up in recent years. And there's also nearly 200 verified venture capital investors. Some of the famous companies in Belgium include Odoo, Exotech, and Team Blue. And finally, before we do this online event, let's meet in April. If you visit startupnetwork.eu/Belgium, I will share this link in the chat box. You will see information about our face-to-face meetups in Brussels and Antwerp. And also, let's network online. We have made an online community called the Belgium Startup Community. It's going to be part of a much larger European startup community. It's free to join, run by full-time community managers, and our idea is to give you a community where people help each other out and member-only events that are online but also face-to-face. You can also see a list of our sponsors and our speakers in this link. So I'm going to share that in one moment. Now, finally, I can kick off the event. Obviously, I've just given the webinar opening. I'm the founder of Startup Network Europe, and our first section is a panel discussion with Leen, a general manager of Startups.be, Scale-Ups.eu, Marc, a president of the Brussels Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He's also a founding partner at InnoWings. And last but not least, Yulia, a president of the European Women's Association. And Yulia also has many other initiatives that she works in. Leen, I think we can begin with you.
Yes.
Yes. Hello to the 560 people connected right now.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yeah, so Leen, my question for you and the other panelists is, why is Belgium a good country to set up a startup in?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of reasons to start your company in Belgium. One of the things, Belgium is located very central. If you want in the world, but especially in Europe, it's very central located, and we have good infrastructure in Belgium. So we have good highways, we have good railway stations, we have good harbors and rivers in the neighborhood. So it's a very central location. On the other hand, I think Belgians have very good entrepreneurial spirit, and we have a lot of employee potential in Belgium with an entrepreneurial mindset. So we have strong work ethics in Belgium. So it makes it a place where you as an entrepreneur can do a lot of business, and I think.
Great, thank you, Leen. And Marc, would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, first of all, I can only 200% agree with what Leen said. I would just to add to that we have a very good network of high top-level universities and R&D center. You find people who are multilingual by nature, and because it's a small country, an open mindset. So people who really can work well in Belgium, but also can travel around the world quite well. And Leen said that Belgium and Brussels is a very good place to radiate to Europe and to the world. So that's very good. And it's an open country. It's a small country, but it's directly open with open frontiers to the rest of Europe. And you said how big the market is in Europe, of course.
Great. And Marc, just to expand on that, what sectors are thriving in Belgium right now?
Okay, there are some traditional sectors like biotech is a very strong sector. The services in general, the payment industry has been since a very long time thriving in Belgium. But to be honest, today, when I look at the landscape of startups and scale-ups, it's really going in all directions. And that's really a reflection of the type of economy that Belgium has.
Great. And Leen, I will do that question back to you. What sectors do you see thriving at the moment?
What Marc says is correct. But we also see a lot of potential in tech-related companies. So everything that's tech-related, whether it's B2B or B2C, we see that most of the startups and the good startups and growing startups are tech-related. So what we've seen in the past years over COVID times, we saw a lot of B2C-related tech companies. We see a high rise in health-related of health tech companies in Belgium, and also everything that is in relation with everything that has to do with climate and connectivity also is in rise, I think.
Great. And I think a really good question for you is, we've heard good things about Belgium, but what can be improved in your opinion?
Well, I think we are a small country, and we have a lot of good initiatives to help and support startups and scale-ups. But maybe we have a bit too much initiatives. That's one thing. So we better have one big initiative or all initiatives supporting each other than very diverse initiatives. That's one thing. On the other hand, we have a lot of initiatives in the Flemish part, and we have initiatives in French-speaking parts or in Brussels, but we don't have such a thing as a Belgian initiative. So that's one thing we can improve in Belgium, and we should focus more on Belgium and even more on Europe. So that's one thing I would like to address, that we should look faster to Europe than instead staying in Flemish parts or in Belgium.
Yeah, very good. And Marc, I think I can do that question back to you. What do you think should be improved in Belgium to facilitate more business?
Yeah, I agree with Leen. There are many initiatives, but to be honest, at one sense, you need a bit of a chaotic environment to drive innovation. You cannot fix everything because different people have different ideas, different perspectives, and that's just the richness of the landscape in Belgium. At the other end, where we can certainly improve as a small country, is to identify earlier the real potential winners and put them on a fast track, which is then much more orchestrated. That is certainly the one thing that can help all startups and scale-ups then to accelerate their growth.
Great, thank you very much, Marc. I really appreciate that. And folks, I'm going to actually open up a poll now. We've talked about location in Belgium. So here you can tell us if you're in Belgium, where you are in Belgium, and if not, where in the world you may be. Marc and Leen, thank you so much for your inputs. I really appreciate it. We're going on time, which is actually very rare. Our next speaker will be Yulia, President of the European Women's Association. Yulia, how is partnership important for you? I know you you focus a lot on women in business as well.
Thank you for having me that late anyway. So I'm joining in from Dubai as we are here on our partnership deal. We are based in Brussels in Belgium, and we've seen it's not easy to scale in little Belgium and to reach many female entrepreneurs, as our main mission is to get more women funded and more women in the scale-up phase. So for that, we need partnerships, and we've been brainstorming a few years ago, and we've seen that the success towards female, I would say, funding, we needed VCs, international ones, not only in Belgium. We don't have enough VCs there. We don't have enough female founders well who are ready for the VC stage. So we've now partnered with the government. We've partnered with the Ministry of Economy here in UAE. We work quite closely with European Commission, but then we also work with business angel communities together internationally. We work with VCs internationally. So we've seen during the COVID, you can do so much more online, and now we can finally travel and meet in person and sign all these agreements. But partnership for us, as we are B2B platform as well, was the key to scale. We could reach to many communities, startup scene, accelerators who could provide us with the deal flow, business angels who were looking for co-investors. So partnership, I think, is the key almost for every business, as it's such a small world and everybody knows each other. And having the right partners like in ecosystem, like government, private sector, entrepreneurs, accelerator, well, that's the beauty of it. So it's a bit easier, I think, to reach more people through partnerships. So for us, it's been a great success.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Yulia. So folks, next up we have another section. It's going to be called our Silicon Belgium Rapid Fire Talks. So these people are essentially founders who are in Belgium. They are Ilse, a co-founder and chief people officer of Customs for Trade, Inga, founder of CV Warehouse, Anjo, founder and CEO of Playtrex, and Tanguy, founder of Cowbuy. I hope I've pronounced all your names right. And Ilse, I think we can begin with you. And your question is, what is the most interesting challenge that your startup has overcome? And everybody has 1 minute 45 seconds to answer this question.
Thank you, Adam. So happy to shine a light on the challenges that we experienced. Basically, together with our CEO, Peter Hazard, and 150 C4 we are on a mission to be the #1 global customs solution. And of course, on this journey, we faced many challenges. So it was not one challenge at the time, but all challenges, let's say, coming together. This was really, let's say, facing a hyper growth. And I'm happy to share a couple of facts and figures to provide more context. So over the past years, we have raised in total 22 million in funding from international VCs. With that, we connected our SaaS solution in 8 countries already in the European space. And this was very well perceived by the market and by our customers. And this then resulted in a very good annual recurring revenue. So today we are already at 7 million IRR. And we have very good hopes that somewhere later this year, we will reach as well the magic milestone of 10 million. At the same time, we also built a team. So we started the team with 20 people. Today we have 150 C4. We have a global ambition, so we're also building the team globally. Today we have already more than 30 different nationalities on board, and we have payroll in 5 different countries. So yes, challenges enough, I would say, over the past period. So how did we overcome those challenges? I think in essence, there is always the big picture that you need to have in mind. There is a lot of trial and error to proceed in an agile way. There is a good portion of luck needed, but in essence, it also comes down to bringing the right people together. People that have the right mindset, people that have an entrepreneurial mindset, but also bringing in people that have that scalability already and experienced that. So from the beginning, I think we also were, let's say, we're on a good track by investing already in HR tech, because this is really very important to support a company in fast growth. And if there is in the audience, if there are people that are looking for a new challenge, well, we still are looking for very good people. So happy to meet you. You can definitely apply for one of the 25 vacant positions.
Thank you, Ilse. And if you wish, you can share the link in the chat box with attendees. So folks, our next speaker, as I mentioned, will be Inga, founder of CV Warehouse. And same question, what is the most interesting challenge that your startup has overcome?
Hi, good evening. For me, my most interesting and very, very sudden challenge was actually after raising money from venture capitalists that I bumped into a complete lack and break of trust with my venture capitalists after less than a year, but also after I spent all their money. So it was a huge challenge. They actually invested in a competitive company of mine. They didn't tell me, forgot to tell me, don't know how to, but I found out, and it was really a complete break, and the company was not functioning anymore. And it took months to get out of this. Actually, in order to get out, I sold another company and I bought back all my shares. That's now being told in 1 minute, and it took me 6 months to get through all this hassle. So actually, before my company started and I went with my product to market, I already crashed completely.
Great. Thank you very much, Inga. Really appreciate that. And our next speaker will be Tanguy, founder of Scale-Ups.eu.
Hey guys, thanks for the invitation. So for us at Scale-Ups.eu, it was attracting world-class talents. Basically, when you raise money and you have to go super quickly, since the beginning of Scale-Ups.eu, we've raised more than 100 million euros. And so it means that you have to hire a lot of people. And so even if we're based in Brussels, we have more than 40% of our employees not coming from Belgium. And it's because today we still don't have a strong enough talent pool in Belgium. The ecosystem is not mature enough, and we just need more successful startups and scale-ups in Belgium. And so early on at Scale-Ups.eu, we decided to be a remote-friendly company, and we focus on three cities to find talents: Paris, London, and Amsterdam. And thanks to the high-speed train, it's super easy for them to come to the office when needed. And basically every 3 months, what we do is we gather everyone in the office for a week so we can all align on the objective of the company and make sure that we keep that culture that we have at Scale-Ups.eu. We also try to design the most attractive package for those talents. And so it means you can work from everywhere at Scale-Ups.eu, but we're also giving stock option to every single employee in the company. And on that point, it's a bit painful in Belgium because compared to other countries, you have to pay a lot of money up front when you receive stock options. So it's not easy to pitch that to new employees, as most of them, they use to pay taxes when you actually sell the options. And I just think that as entrepreneurs, we have to advocate for a simpler scheme in Belgium so we can actually incentive employees and we can compete with scale-ups from France and Netherlands for those talents. That's it for me.
Thank you very much. And now we go on to our next section. This is our VC Belgium Rapid Fire Talks. So we're going to have Patrick, founder and managing director of Finwise, Janka, I think, general partner at Gilda Healthcare, Cohen, venture partner at Volta Ventures, Thijs, investment manager at Peak, and Alexandre, partner at Scale Fund. So Patrick, if we can just begin with you, your question is, and same for all the panelists, given your experience, what tips do you have for Belgian startups and scale-ups getting funding in 2022?
Thanks, Adam. I'm happy to be here. I think it's fair to say we're coming from a record period of funding and record valuations for startups. Probably fair to say that the recent problem that has occurred on a geopolitical front has made investors a bit more wary at the moment. I think things are still okay, but there's a little bit more conservatism, I think, that has come into the market, which is understandable, to be fair, given the context, the high inflation as well. Sometimes the people talk about recession and all this, so that makes investors a bit more careful. That doesn't mean everything has changed. I think at some point, I mean, if you're a very good company, you'll still get the valuation you want. If you haven't found product market fit yet, it's probably a bit more complicated. I think my top advice for startups and scale-ups would be to be a bit more flexible, to be prepared for also a downturn scenario. You never know. I mean, I don't think it's likely, but you want to be prepared in case. So cash is always king, and in this situation, I think it's better to play on the safe side and have a little bit lower valuation if needed. At the end of the day, valuation is only one part of what is important. I think there's also how much control you want to give up. There's also how much privilege do you give to your VC in terms of liquidation preference, and all these things have an impact as well on your exit value. So I would certainly be a bit more flexible. My second tip would be is maybe, and that I see with clients, is more interest in convertibles at the moment, which is a tool that is used to postpone a bit of discussion on valuation, and that can be handy as well in this market, because that basically means that you're going to give investors a discount on the next round's valuation, but you don't necessarily have to already pinpoint a valuation now. Maybe you can already log them into that next round, even on a certain formula that you decide. I think there are ways to find a good balance and to make sure it's a fair deal for both the startup and the investor. So these would be my two tips, I think.
Patrick, thank you very much. And our next speaker will be Cohen, a venture partner at Volta Ventures.
Hi, everybody. So yes, Koen, Volta Ventures. So we invest in pre-seed, seed, and Series A, Series A B2B software. As to the question, yeah, it definitely increased uncertainty, inflation pressure has an impact, maybe not directly on the startup and his investor, but on the investors behind a VC are impacted by this on asset allocation and where they will put their money. So I would say a couple of tips. One, make sure your VC you're talking to invest off a balance sheet and of committed monies, and doesn't have to go turning back to his LPs to ask for money, because they might be more impacted by the situation and not ready to jump. Secondly, I think investors will look much more to path to profitability. I'm not saying that for VC funding you need to be profitable, but you need to be demonstrating that you can get there, that your model works. Much more than in the past, where profitability would be looked at more voluntarily. And maybe the biggest, maybe two others. One, be careful with debt, because when the debt runs out and you don't have equity, you're stuck. When the equity runs out, you can still get debt. Be careful with loading too much debt on your balance sheet. And last point, probably the most important, make sure you have the runway. Runway before going for funding. So look at your cost and your runway to extend as much as possible to have the time to get the funding at the right moment. But also after getting the funding, don't jump into it and spend it very aggressively, because it might take longer to raise further funding. So runway has always been a mantra, and my mantra in early stage companies has been a bit less important recent 2-3 years, but is back on the table. Make sure you have the room to get where you need to get. I would say those would be my main tips.
Cohen, thank you very much. And I can see we have 665 people connected now live, which is fantastic. So our next speaker will be Janka Dittmer, General Partner at Gilda Healthcare.
A pleasure to be here. And Adam, you give me the sign when it's the end of the 1.5 minutes. So I'm responsible for health tech investments at Gilde Healthcare in Europe. So that's medtech, digital health, diagnostics, and life science tools. We also invest in therapeutics, and we have a separate private equity fund, very active in the Benelux, but also throughout Europe. We are investing from 2 funds. One is a $450 million transatlantic venture and growth fund, and that's what I'm responsible for here in Europe. And we also have a 517 million private equity fund in Europe doing low market, mid-market buyouts in the healthcare space, or anyone that delivers to hospitals or healthcare providers. And Belgium is obviously a market that's very close to us. The Dutch transatlantic firm with long roots here in the region. Originally 1982, we set up the first venture capital fund in Utrecht and have invested in companies like Ablinks, Galapagos, and most recently in Nixoa, where I was vice chairman and brought them to Euronext first and then to NASDAQ in the summer. This is a Neurostim for sleep apnea company. In terms of the advice for companies, it's all about entering a long-term partnership. So think about, just like with your other partnerships in life, like marriages, think about who you get involved with, because it might be a very long journey. Even if it's a very positive one, it can take 5 to 10 years on the good side, and even longer. In our longest holdings, it's been 14, 15 years. So, and then there's horses for courses, right? The type of investor will determine what opportunities you will get, and there's real difference. I think right now there's a lot of money going around, but look for what else you can get on top of the money in terms of networks, in terms of influence, in terms of know-how, and real willingness to engage. So if somebody has 10 board seats, they probably can't add value. So look for people who are a little bit more hungry with maybe 3 to 5 board seats. That would be my advice.
Hey, thank you very much. And before we go on to our next speaker, I'm actually going to share the polls that we did earlier. So in terms of location, we're doing very well, actually. Brussels, 25%, Flanders, 41%, Wallonia, 6% of people. But we also have an international audience of about 22%. Lots of people in the rest of Europe, but also North America and Asia. And then if we stop sharing that and we share attendee roles, this is super interesting. 49% of you said that you are founders or CXOs, but we also have 10% of the people here as investors or venture capitalists. And then after that, we have people in marketing and sales, in tech, and other areas. And in terms of the size of your companies, most of you, 60%, are from companies with under 10 people, but we also have people from very, very big companies as well. Folks, next up, we have Thijs, who is an investment manager at Peak.
Yes, thank you, Adam. So my name is Thijs, investment manager at Peak, and responsible for the sourcing in the Benelux region. Peak is a pan-European seed fund with the focus on SaaS and marketplaces, and we are investing ticket sizes 250K up to 4 million. We're very much entrepreneurial roots and therefore provide strong support for our portfolio companies to scale their teams, scale internationally, and get ready for even larger funding rounds. And despite the current horrors going on in Eastern Europe, we are still very bullish about the startup tech ecosystem and therefore ready to deploy our pre-committed capital. My tip for the startup community is really think bigger, faster if you want to raise capital from international VCs. We noticed that in Belgium, there's still some catching up to do compared to other ecosystems. Whilst there are a lot of relevant solutions in Belgium, I often question, do they have the international and global potential to compete with other tech ecosystems and other players and competitors over there? And given the relatively small market size in Belgium, it's important to show your ambition, and even better if you can show your ability to scale internationally earlier. And I noticed that in the pitches, often it's quite conservative. We're going to scale in Belgium, then to the Netherlands. And I'm like, why not scale faster internationally to larger markets? And I think a good example was a company, Logtex, which raised like 3.6 million in a very early stage, just based on the founders' bold ambitions and global potential of that opportunity. So luckily, we're seeing more of these examples and your ecosystem is growing fast. And I would say you have great founders, you have great initiatives, be bolder in your ambition and go out there, go for it.
Great, thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Alexandra, partner at Scale Fund.
Thanks for having me, Adam. So yeah, Scale Fund, we invest in the post-seed Series A companies. So really making the bridge for company with the scale up, supportive to entrepreneurs and help them to go abroad. And then indeed, as Stace just said, going fast abroad, which is very important, and not only Belgium and Benelux, but we look for ambitious entrepreneurs. Regarding the advice, quite tough to discuss after so many you already had. But to me, it's really important that you do your proper homework before starting your fundraising. So really mapping the market, saying, okay, who is my good VC, my good investor? Which type of capital do I need to have a proper structure to my company? Maybe some debt, maybe some equity, but really think of that in advance. It's important that you are fast when you're fundraising, you have a goal, your fund round is well sized compared to your objective, super important too. Like, you know what the money will be used for, you know which goal you will be able to reach, and you keep focus. Otherwise, you stay in the market for too long, and it's becomes super complicated because everybody knows the fight for months and years, and you lose focus. And then on the top of that, you're not able to focus on your own business. So that's very important. Also, it has been discussed, but be careful with the valuation and your ask. It's good to be ambitious, but on the other side, in uncertain time as we are currently living in, it's very important to have cash at hand. You will become more flexible, more able to adapt to what can happen, and you can see that with the current crisis in terms of components and so on. So be sure you have the cash, be sure you are able to go through those crises, and then you will probably be stronger in the next few months. So don't be too greedy at the beginning. Find your right partner and the people supporting you around the table. And finally, maybe a last one. It's true that convertible loans have been quite highly demanded by entrepreneurs recently, but definitely agree what has been already said. Like, you push the discussion forward, you push the problem forward, and if for any reason everything doesn't go as planned, you get into trouble. So we come back again to my first advice. So be well prepared, define well your objective, and you'll probably be successful.
Okay, thank you so much. And before we go on to our next section, everyone, this is incredible. 40% almost of people in this conference are looking for investment. So my advice is visit startupnetwork.eu/Belgium. I've shared the link in the chat, and you'll be able to actually see all the VCs that we have here at the event in case you want to connect with them. Next up, we have another new section, and we're going away from the investment area into startup founders again. So here we have Vincent, a founder and CEO of Andaman 7, Patrick, founder and CEO of Social Cedar, Felipe, CEO of Via Ligas Legal Staffing Solutions, and Hans, founder of Jigsaw, and he's also a co-owner of Bean Machine. The question for everyone in this section will be, how long did it take your company to find success? Was there a memorable tipping point? So Vincent, if we can begin with you, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the question. Well, many people say it takes 10 years to build an overnight success, right? And I think that's really true. It takes a lot of time to build a company. And also, I'm not sure that when you are successful, right? Clearly, maybe Google, Apple are successful, but all the other ones, are we already successful? I don't know. This is my third company, so I'm still progressing. And I think it's important to celebrate all small and intermediate successes, but I'm not sure to say that, okay, now we did it, now it's a success. And I think it's always, the success is probably always in the future, probably. Anyway, now regarding memorable tipping points, there's quite a few usually when you're on the track to develop a company. My first surprise was when I raised the first round. I was looking for €500,000, and I quite quickly, quite easily, I would say, found 1.3 million, so almost 3 times. So that was very surprising to me, but it was very encouraging. Also, what feels good is when you have calls with big players like Google, Apple, or some of the top pharma, which because we are in the digital health field. So that's also eye-opening, I would say. Or you say, oh, maybe what I'm doing has some interest, right? So that's also a interesting moments. Also, when your first customer signs a project with you, which is €500,000, which happened to us a few months ago, that's very encouraging too. You see, okay, maybe there's something to do. And then, I don't know, maybe the next tipping point will be our current goal, which is our current target, which is to raise extra funds between 2 and 5 million and to recruit a US-based CEO. That's our current objective for this year. So if we succeed in that, then I think it's going to be a good tipping point too. I think I went over my time. So
don't worry, Vincent. And next up, we have Patrick, who is founder and CEO of Social Cedar.
Yes, hello everybody.
Hello.
Yes, the tipping point or memorable tipping point. We started 7.5 years ago, and for us it was a bit different because I come from a marketing background. So in the beginning, the tipping point was to find out that word of mouth created impact all around the world because we are all human beings and we all listen to other human beings. So that's the first tipping point, is the aha-erlebnis when you start your business or your idea. The second tipping point for us was when we saw that we could go from a more, I would say, red ocean to a blue ocean, because marketing is a very, there's so many software around there, but we saw that lots of people also used us in an HR perspective to create buzz around their business, and thus also to look for talent. And that was for us the second very interesting tipping point, where you saw that people really used you in a more blue ocean environment. HR is also much more linked to long contracts. So we immediately had almost no churn anymore. So when you see that the churn is almost close to zero, then obviously you have your second aha-erlebnis, and then you know that you have something that could be interesting for the rest of the world. So voila, that's our experience.
Yeah, Patrick, it's fantastic when you get proof of concept. It can take many years, so well done on getting that. And our next speaker is Philippe, CEO of WEgate Legal Staffing Solutions.
Thank you. In fact, I wear different hats because I founded a couple of companies, including WEgate, but I'm also a business angel with a stake in 6-7 startups, and invested quite a lot in the last years in funds, both private equity and VC. So I look at it from different angles, in fact. WEgate, we set up in 2003. We were successful, if I may say so, after 1 month, and have been market leader for 18 months. So that part is very, very boring in my case. And I'd rather like to focus on a couple of challenges we experienced in the last period on the one hand, and then 1 or 2 lessons learned as an investors in startups. 2021 was in our business, which is legal staffing, legal recruitment, a very, very hectic year. And the main challenge was really finding enough good internal people to cope with this demand while not compromising on quality. And after this amazing year, also making sure people don't really get into a burnout, which is really, really a big issue, I think, not only for us, but for quite a lot of companies across the board. Second part was that, we operate in 4 countries. And of course, it was very, very difficult during the pandemic to go and visit them. And certainly, whenever there is a problem, it's often easier to try to solve it over a coffee or a beer than during a Teams meeting. So that was a real challenge, trying to solve possible problems abroad, and equally starting up in new countries. We have a further expansion plan, but finding country managers, go and visit them, is obviously something that we had to put on hold, and that luckily we could revive more recently, and we'll be able to start up, in fact, in the Netherlands in June of this year. As an investor, in all modesty, a few lessons learned, maybe a bit provocative also. My feeling is that if entrepreneurs make amazing spreadsheets, that looks great, but I'm not sure it's always a good thing, because they sometimes have a tendency to spend a lot of time working on these, improving them, rather than focusing on the real business. 2, communication is key, both in good and in bad times. And it's not always easy for entrepreneurs to have to tell bad news to their investors, but it's much better to do it at an early stage when the problem is still small and it can be solved. And thirdly, while governance and reporting are obviously important also for small startups, the most important thing still is obviously the business itself. And that's something that both the entrepreneurs and the investors should always keep in mind. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Love the provocative advice. It's always the best type. So next up, folks, we have Hans, founder of Jigsaw, co-owner of Bean Machine.
Hello, everyone. How long did it take? Well, I'm impatient by nature, so far too long. But I'll bear in mind what Vincent said about the 10 years. But so I think the story of our first 2 years is one of what not to do as a startup. We gathered very smart people around the table. We were developing algorithms for predictive analysis of employee churn and absence. And so I think we were building a product that was definitely solving a problem. And a lot of companies were inviting us to have coffee and to tell about it and wanting to learn from us. But very few people were actually willing to buy the product. So I think we had in the first few years, we had a good problem solution fit, but not at all a product market fit. And so the turning point was really when we pivoted to a less advanced product, but one for which companies were actually willing to put money on the table. And so let's say in our second phase, before writing a single line of code, we had important paying customers like the National Bank here in Belgium or Pfizer, and then the GS came along. And so that really showed that there was a product market fit once people were willing to put the money on the table and put it on again. So in the recurring contract. And I guess the next tipping point was when we closed recently a 6-digit deal with a company where we're now rolling out our solution for 35,000 employees on 3 different continents. And maybe a tipping point that really makes me excited was last week when one of those first customers said, well, you're really shifting things here. And so I think that's even beyond the money, the proof of a product market fit.
Yeah, excellent answer. Thank you so much. That's the last of our 2-minute answer questions. For now, we are going to have 7-minute chats, fireside chats. And our first speaker in this section will be John Cutler, product evangelist at Amplitude. And we're going to talk about digital optimization, the importance of digital products as well for startups. And I suppose you're an expert in the field, if you don't mind me saying. You've had more than 15 years of experience. So can you perhaps tell me a little bit about how the digital product category has evolved over the years and what's considered a digital product?
Yeah, I'll start with the second part of that. The fascinating thing here is you're seeing native digital product companies, that were selling a digital product, pivoting into the quote unquote real world. And you're seeing companies that were functioning in the real world with physical products, then increasingly thinking of their offering as a digital product. So for example, a hospitality company then suddenly is embracing all sorts of digital channels. And then a fresh native startup is digital first product is trying to engage in the real world in some way, either in logistics or some element of the real world. So I think that the most interesting aspect is that what we're seeing now is that everything can benefit from thinking in terms of product thinking, whether it's a non-digital product by definition, or if it's a pure digital product. So I think that the most interesting thing we're seeing now is all sorts of interesting plays where you see digital product first companies embracing things like logistics and hospitality and all sorts of interesting things. And then the reverse, large companies exploring what it would be like to have their offering as more of like a digitally enabled product. So I think it's a fascinating time.
And what kind of trends are you seeing at the moment, John?
Well, I think that one, at least in the startup landscape, what I'm seeing is that now more than ever, it's extremely important to kind of stake out your ground in terms of the problem space. And so what I mean by that is that having a kind of trivial technical solution to something is good, obviously, but there's incredible amount of competition now, even from incumbents and people. So you really need to think about it as a startup. What do you really want to be the best in the world at? So you see, I mean, we have at Amplitude some large, Fortune N companies that are actually building their digital product making muscle pretty quickly. And that's part of your competition there. So what I mean by sort of being obsessed by the problem is you need to anticipate as a startup is that you will invent new and better ways over the next decade or so to solve the problem that you're hoping to solve. The idea of having a purely technology-oriented moat is becoming increasingly more difficult. So that idea of being obsessed with the customer, obsessed with the problem, and then anticipating that you're going to need to reinvent how you solve that problem over the next decade or so, I think that it's tough out there, but there's still obviously a lot of opportunities.
Cool. And you talk about being obsessed with the product, putting the customer first. Do you think too many startups don't do that?
Well, it's so cliche for me to say that, but you'd be amazed how many, there's two ways to think about product in some ways. One is that you solve a problem for a group of people that you know intimately, you are the persona, you build for that group of people, and then it turns out that it's the whole world. That's lucky when it can happen. There is another model of that where you start outside in, right? You find a real sort of glaring problem and you work outside into your solution offering. I had the benefit here in Santa Barbara where I live, two technical founders had founded like GoToMyPC, and they had sold those types of businesses. And they just became obsessed that the next time they were going to do this, they were going to start outside in and really understand what the world is like minus their product, and then try to fill a need with their particular product. So I don't think there's a right way or wrong way. I know technical founders who have a very interesting solution to a group of people they understand, and they do incredibly well, like a company like DBT or something like that. But on the flip side, I think that people do need to consider the outside in approach as well for their startups. I think both work, but you should consider both.
And finally, you mentioned some trends earlier. How do you see them affecting startups going forward in the future?
Well, I think I alluded to that a little bit before, that your advantage is speed. And your advantage is lack of bureaucracy, and your advantage is the ability to zero in on one particular problem there. So I think trend number one, as I mentioned, is, the legacy players are building up their capabilities. So the idea of, being able to rely completely on incumbents not being able to respond to you, I think especially as more and more tools become available to companies to work with, I think the potential of that becomes a little less as we're moving along. So I think at that particular point, the trend then for startups is you've got to find that thing that you can be obsessed about for these next 5 or 10 years to be able to do it. So I think that that's the key trend that I'd like to mention is that the capabilities are kind of evening out. The ability, I don't know if anyone who's been doing this for a while, maybe 15 years ago, let's say you wanted to spin up like a machine learning stack, or you wanted to try to process 1 billion events a day, or you wanted to do a number of things. That was an incredible lift just to be able to get those things moving. And so now what you see is that there's a little bit more of a level playing field with certain parts of the sort of technology stack that makes those less of a moat. And so you have to decide, like, what is that thing that's going to give you that particular moat. I'd also say, we're in the data space at Amplitude, and you can't fathom the difference in teams. There are teams that it takes a quarter or two to really learn something. And there are teams that they do that in days. So I always ask teams, are you shipping faster than you learn or learning faster than you ship? And if I asked that 15 years ago, many, many more teams were saying we're learning faster than we ship. Now, 15 years later, many, many, many more teams, 80% are saying they're shipping faster than they learn. So that movement of just being able to ship as a competitive advantage is going down. And so you have to think about the learning speed, how quickly are you learning as a company? And the differences are vast. Like I say, the range of 180 days to learn the same thing that another company learns in 3 to 6 days. And that is an incredible advantage you have as a startup if you can cultivate that. It's just mind-boggling, the difference.
Well, John, thank you so much for your input. Very interesting. And for anyone who doesn't know, we're doing the European Digital Optimization Conference together in July. I'll share a link.
Yep, very
to
excited
that.
for that.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, it's
Can't
going to
wait.
be wonderful.
Yeah, our first European
Cool.
event.
All right.
So guys, next up, we have Frank from Twilio. So Frank is based in London, where he is Twilio Startup's ecosystem developer for the EMEA and global emerging markets. He has extensive experience working with international teams, and he acts as a startup biz ops mentor for Techstars and 500 startups. And Frank, I suppose my question for you, there's a lot of startups who are fantastic at marketing and selling. They spend a lot of time on generating customer growth, but then they don't really retain the customers. So how do you think customer generation, but also retention can be improved?
Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you, everyone. With regards to your question, I do think that initially when founders are building startups, they need to double down and focus on things that don't scale. I think looking at it from a communications and customer engagement lens, what we've seen at Twilio is really communications is the bedrock of trust more than anything. And so what you're really trying to do as you're scaling a business is not just the acquisition of customers, but more importantly, do you have the capacity to retain them and reduce churn? So I think more importantly than anything, when we're looking at communications and customer engagement, what we're beginning to see is that customer engagement is becoming a really key differentiator in the startup space and ecosystem in terms of how you're reaching your customers, how you're communicating with them, what's the cadence or the frequency by which you're doing this, and then ensuring you have the capacity to do this at scale. And I really think best practices is for founders to start thinking about this as early as possible, because it does very much impact your go-to-market strategy.
Great. And in your opinion, what kind of factors drive customer growth?
I think customer growth comes from a variety of different places, but really understanding why your customers need to utilize your product. I think what we've seen is you've got communications, which could be, for example, SMS, it could be email, it can be WhatsApp, a variety of different communication channels. And this is then a form of customer engagement in terms of that flywheel that you then generate. But really your ability to achieve product market fit will be predicated, as I mentioned before, on your ability to reduce churn, how you continue to engage with your customers. And if you can keep on doing this type of experiment. And I think when everything's said and done, it is a series of multiple experiments that founders are looking to at least test and experiment and see if these do work. And that is what will then lead to them hopefully achieving product market fit and then the scale that comes off the back of that.
Great. And I suppose there's a lot of debate about what to analyze in terms of company growth. What do you think are the false positives that startups spend too much time looking at?
I think a lot of the time you've got obviously very obvious KPIs, like, what's your revenue? How many customers are you acquiring month on month? What's the cost of acquisition? But I think founders need to really focus on, KPIs that are just relevant to the type of product you're building, like product specific KPIs are important. And then again, just enveloping that with really understanding who are your customers, are you reaching them effectively in the manner that they would like to be reached? And I think when we look at the whole communications landscape, I don't think there's ever been a time that's easier to embed communications into your products, into your websites. And so it's really thinking about, apart from the KPIs we're focusing on, which are all great for revenue and customer acquisition, just ensuring that we're being very, very cognizant that we're focusing on the KPIs that are specific to the product and that are really trying to highlight the impact that you're looking to achieve.
Cool. And Frank, I'm going to share a couple of polls that I shared while you were speaking. So in Belgium, we can see that there's a lot more B2B startups compared to B2C, which is actually very typical for Europe. I mean, some people say both, but I'm B2C and B2B, but 90% B2B. What do you think B2B startups then have to do differently to B2C? For example, in B2C, I've used WhatsApp before. Do you think that's appropriate in B2B communications?
I think it really depends, but I would say with B2B communications, startups we've seen who do that really well, for example, Airbnb, Zapier, they use email in a really great way to almost warm up the customer. And as I mentioned before, email is still the biggest form of communication. I think around 85% of startups, and as we can see with the poll that you've done here, 60% of people and founders would say that email is probably their main driver. And so what we see really great B2B businesses do is, for example, they send out the right types of marketing campaigns. Zapier, for example, will provide almost a productivity list at the end of every week, the first fortnight, to see, how you've performed what you're doing. And so I think there is almost an art and a science behind email marketing and a lot of work that needs to go behind it, but it's still a very powerful driver for B2B businesses to use, especially if they're looking at a bottom-up strategy and approach to reaching their customers. Because most of the time, it's very hard to identify who you're selling into if you're looking to sell into the enterprise. And so if you do have, for example, a variety of different people within a business who are beginning to adopt your product and you're leveraging email marketing in the right way, that can help you really work the engine in terms of being able to sell from a bottom-up approach. That makes it a lot easier to sell within the enterprise when the time is right.
Yeah, and just to finish up, a new question for you. Can you remember a really good or really bad email that you've received recently?
Yes, I received quite a few of those. And I think usually it's just the lack of clarity around the subject line. It's quite muddled. There's no clarity as to what the email is really trying to communicate or present. And so really, when working with founders, is really trying to get them to understand how they structure their email marketing. But just beyond the email marketing, really thinking about what is the output of what you're trying to communicate, whether this is through SMS or WhatsApp or email, across any medium, really thinking about who your audience is, why you're trying to communicate with them, and what the nature of that message looks like, I think creates a massive amount of impact and is all part of that process of facilitating trust.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Frank. Always a good conversation. So folks, next up, we have Sumitra from Freshworks for Startups.
Hello. Hi, Adam. Thank you for having me, and you guys are doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's great to have you on board for the first time as a partner. And that's it. We're talking about partnerships today and their importance. So perhaps you can just quickly explain what Freshworks does and then tell me why are partnerships important for a startup or scale up?
Absolutely. So folks, I'm Soumitra. I head Freshworks for Startups Initiative for EMEA as a region. Freshworks is a B2B SaaS product company. We were born in 2010, now publicly listed company on NASDAQ. And we were historically funded by Google Capital, Axel, Sequoia, and Tiger Global. And now, we were valued at $14 billion when we went public. Talking about partnerships, which is my kind of, my passionate area. So partnerships are a form of a go-to-market engine that gives a company or you an opportunity to collaborate with external players in the ecosystem to achieve non-linear growth for your business, right? There are three main ways how partnership can benefit your business. One is to achieve growth. Second is to basically let you flow global, where your teams can't be and you can't be everywhere. And third is partnerships or your partners act as face of your company and as your extended team. When it comes to growth, it kind of benefits at you at four levels where you can leverage partnerships on. One is top of the funnel or brand awareness. You can leverage partnerships on that. Second is lead gen or lead generation for your business. Third is revenue or sales. There are sales partnerships. And the final piece is around customer success or retention. So there are kind of partnerships which help you retain more customers for your business.
Great. And what I suppose, just to follow on to that, can you tell me about what factors you should look at when considering a partner? I mean, is this person trustworthy? Is it good for both of us? There's so many things to consider.
Yeah. See, first thing first, I think what you need to look at is, why do you even need a partner program, right? So partnerships or partner programs are not for everyone. There are two major aspects you should be looking at before even thinking about partnerships as a growth engine for you. One is program alignment, and second is partner alignment. So the program alignment essentially includes what are the KPIs, what is going to be the ROI, what is going to be your rules of engagement, what's going to be your financial model when you're stepping into any kind of a partner program, the contract legalities, the data sharing, and so on and so forth. Partner alignment includes, what is in it for partners. Think of it like, it has to be synergetic and symbiotic for both the parties, otherwise it's not going to work. What's their success path? Is there a tiered approach, how they are going to look at growth, and so on and so forth. So if you have these two aspects under control, the major factors that will define success for a partner program would be, what's your ideal partner profile? How are you hunting them, or where are you getting these partner from? What's the engagement effort that's going in, and what's the life cycle for a partner? And what's the financial model, or how's the program benefiting you and them? And finally, what are the rules of engagement? How this is going to grow for you and kind of become a sustainable engine for you.
Great, thank you. And I suppose my next question, Freshworks last year, I think in September, IPO'd for $1 billion. It's got a very interesting story. How did partnerships help you guys to scale and scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So partnerships have always been an integral part of our growth story. We have done all type of partner programs, right from a reseller program, which was in fact one of the first partner program we launched, reseller or channel program, as most of the people know it, affiliate programs, strategic partnerships, ISV or independent software vendor, or partnering with other product companies, if I have to put it that way, system integrators, and so on and so forth. So all these programs kind of helped us at the different level of the funnel. So if you think at your customer's journey, brand awareness, sales for your business, nurture, and eventually the growth. So all these programs contributed to our kind of every stage of the business, and it helped us, of course, get more money, build a multi-million-dollar program in terms of revenue. At the same time, it kind of gave us an understanding of where the sentiment is, where the industry is moving, and how we should be looking at when we have certain milestones set for ourselves. Now, I mean, just one aspect I would definitely like to call out, and something very passionately we are holding close to our heart, is Freshworks for Startups, or the startup program, because that's one of the newer initiatives where we feel, we want to be with the winners of tomorrow. We want to be with the winners of next wave of those successful companies, and how can we contribute that? It's more of a paid forward sentiment and more of a paid forward initiative for us, and which obviously is going to contribute to our growth as well.
Great, thank you. And what I can do in the chat box is share more information about your Freshwork for Startups program. There's a lot of free credits, I think $10,000 worth for startups attending this conference. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you. And now we have a new section, and I love this section in every event. We're going to focus on Silicon Valley and the rest of the United States, Belgian entrepreneurs who went there, set up their business there, or expanded. So we are going to have Leen, Anke, Yulia, Benjamin, and Gaetan. Leen, we'll begin with you. Your question is, why should Belgian startups go to Silicon Valley? Now, you're the co-founder of the Belgian Business Club Los Angeles, and you're also co-founder and CEO of myexpat.us.
Thanks, Adam. Happy to be with you all today from Los Angeles. Can you enable for me the share screen?
Yep, I'll make you...
Let me first tell you a bit more about California. I'm going to give you a quick perspective on the economy here. As an entrepreneur, you need to be part of and benefit from a very active economy in the location you're going to choose. So here it is. The California gross domestic product is the first of all 50 American states, way ahead of the others, almost twice the second on the list. So that's a very vibrant economy in actually all kinds of sectors. aeronautics, energy services, and so on. So we hear a lot about ecosystems because it's powerful to start and to scale your business efficiently. The challenge is you have to find yours, and that will be an important driver as where to settle in the US, in California, and in a specific area. When looking at those charts, you understand that all ecosystems are not everywhere. Health, software, energy, fintech, and so on. So doing your homework here is important when you prepare your project. And then what is called startup verticals is how you define and you market your activity, the way you want the world to see you, partners, VCs, journalists, customers, vendors, and so on. All those verticals have all niche skills, actors, established company, mentors, and you have to find for your activity, the step you are at, the maturity of your product, where would be located the best environment to go into and the best communities to be part of. I've shown here around 40 verticals, but you could find much more. And just one more thing, I'm going to make a big announcement today. After New York, Atlanta, I'm very excited to introduce in California a new Belgian American Chamber of Commerce here in Los Angeles first, and as soon as possible in San Francisco. That will serve you in 13 Western states, working closely with the trade commissioners of Flanders, Wallonia, and Brussels regions, and the Consul General in Los Angeles. Will be one of the most innovative chamber of commerce in the Western US that creates a unique model combining business-oriented actions and a human-centric approach. And I will be at the April 14th Brussels events and will be available for meeting in Brussels the following 2 weeks of April. So
excellent.
Thank you.
Alain, see you in Brussels. I look forward to it. And next up, we have Anke, founder and CEO of Aptly.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for having me. So in terms of why being in Silicon Valley, so for me, this was not really a conscious choice. I just happened to be here. This is the third company that I founded here in the US. We are in the education technology space. I think some of the big reasons to come here is one is, of course, access to capital, which I think we've heard a lot about access to capital in Belgium. I think at a certain point, depending on what you're looking for, if you're a scale-up and you need large amounts of money, then this may be the place to be. I think in Silicon Valley, we have, of course, our big investors on Sand Hill Road that just are notorious as well for a very kind of narrow geographical action radius. So if you are interested in their money, it often is important to be here. I think another piece that I have found to be really important is the kind of less rigid labor laws that we experience here, but also the kind of opportunities for flexible employment relationships. So for us specifically in the education space, we often have to work with subject matter experts that don't necessarily come in as employees. So we need to have some flexible arrangement to have them on a temporary basis and then be able to easily switch to a new subject matter expert when we're building new courses. So that's been really important for us. It's also been important to be able to kind of say goodbye to people when things don't work out as well. And that's a little bit more flexible here. So I found that to be something that's been really a benefit of being here in the Valley. And the other piece that's really more specific to the Valley that's been important to us, and I think we just heard a lot about partnerships and how partnerships matter. Geographically, it's helped us to be close to what are now our main clients and partners. So Meta, Google, Coursera, those companies are all here. And even though we have many global clients as well, the deepest partnerships we have are with the people that are very close to us here. So that's been a really important factor for us as well. So from a business development perspective, I think there are many benefits to that. And then, of course, I think as you look towards exits potentially, and an exit may be an IPO, but for many of us, that may not be what we aspire to. So I think acquisition opportunities or potential acquirers nearby and the types of partnerships that you can build by being here, that can help as well. Now, I would also say that you may not be at a stage where you need any of all those things, and you may feel like, hey, there's lots of opportunities in Belgium as well, which I'm sure there are, and I don't have the benefit of really being able to compare because I never started a company there. But I would say if you have a chance to come visit, even if you don't plan to be here ever and you don't need to be, I think it's still worth it at any stage at a startup to just come and see what Silicon Valley is all about, and just kind of see what you find in terms of meetups, kind of potentially visit a few companies, just visit the campus of Stanford, for instance. I think it's worth it. It's worth to kind of breathe in the air, like see what's going on here, and then bring some of that back to Belgium. And if you're ever here in the Valley and you feel like you want a guide for that and you want to meet up with another Belgian, I'm here and you should contact me. I'm happy to show you around a few places as well.
Yeah, thank you, Anke. Yeah, let's do it. I haven't been in Silicon Valley yet, so I want to visit.
Next time you're here. Yes.
Cheers. Folks, thank you for that. Next up, we have Julian Penders, co-founder and COO of Bloom Life. And same question, why should Belgian startups go to Silicon Valley?
Hey, Adam. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to chime in here. I'm Julian, co-founder of Bloom Life. Bloom Life is a maternal health company. We're developing a connected care platform that aims to power the future of maternal and prenatal health. I think we have a kind of interesting perspective on the picture. I guess we have our company is based both in Belgium and Silicon Valley, so we've got a bit of a taste of both. I don't think there is a single answer to your question, Adam. I think there is not a one-size-fits-all answer. I think it really has to be put in context of a specific company and specific needs. I think there could be multiple reasons why a Belgian startup wants to kind of take the leap of faith and move to Silicon Valley. And I'll share with you 4 reasons. Some of them have been, I think, mentioned by Anke already, so there'd be a bit of overlap there. But kind of the 4 reasons that I could think of, first for me is the ecosystem. I mean, clearly in the last, 30 years and up till now, Silicon Valley remains the hub for tech innovation. The biggest tech companies have their headquarters, or at least an office here in the Valley. Many of the IT, deep tech, consumer tech, big data startups have their roots in Silicon Valley. And so all of that creates an ecosystem in the tech space, which is very unique. And I don't think you'll find that in many other places. And so as a tech startup, especially when you're starting up, being part of that ecosystem may be very important and very beneficial in terms of accessing the latest tech, leveraging synergies that a startup may have with other startup, right? And eventually it's all about accelerating innovations, accelerating time to market. So being part of that ecosystem, having access to all those technologies can really help you that. So I think that's one reason why you may want to move up to the Valley. Another reason that was kind of mentioned by Anke already is it's market access. It could be that moving to Silicon Valley is part of your go-to-market strategy. If you are a B2B business and your customers are big tech companies, then you want to be close to them, right? And there is no better place to be in the Valley if that's the case. If you're a B2C business, then I think from Belgium, the US is very interesting because it's a very huge, very big, unique market, especially compared to the fragmented market that we have in Europe. And so having access to that unique market is really important. I think that's more about being in the US, but still, like being in the Valley also brings you closer to other founders who have other B2C startups, and that you can benefit from in terms of the experience and share experience between founders in launching B2C. So that could be another reason, market access, why you want to make the move. The third one is access to capital. I won't talk too much about this. Anke mentioned that as well. Clearly, a lot of the VCs, are concentrated in the Valley. Proximity is very important, especially to Silicon Valley VCs. I see that changing a little bit though. I think they're more open now, but still, I think being close is helpful. But it doesn't necessarily make things easier. There is a lot of competition in the Valley, so even if you're there, I don't think that the money was just flowing to your company. I think there was a lot of competition, so you need to cut through the noise. You still need to, and it's not necessarily easier. There is more capital, yes, but there's also way more companies looking for capital. And the fourth one, I think that was really important for us early on, is the vibe, just the overall atmosphere in Silicon Valley. It's a very unique environment. Everyone, here has a new idea, a new project, a new gig, and you can share ideas about this. And that's really, I think, inspiring and motivating. So that also helps, especially in the early phase of a startup. That can also help. So it's kind of the 4 things. In most cases, it's a combination of this. I think every case is a little bit different. The last thing I want to mention before I wrap is that it's not necessarily greener than in other places. And to what Anke said also, there are some great opportunities in Belgium as well. there are challenges to be in the Valley as well. So access to talent is really hard in the Valley compared to some other places. Cost of living, cost of working is really hard. And again, even there is an ever increasing competition in getting access to capital. So these are challenges that you need to deal with when you're here. And I'm not going to derail the discussion. That's a whole other topic, but I didn't want to paint a too rosy picture. There's a lot of opportunity, but there are also challenges like in everything. So something to take into consideration.
Julian, we need the good and the bad, the honesty. So thanks for that.
Yep.
Really appreciate it. And this event is being recorded, so you made so many good points that we can look at it afterwards. Now we're going to quickly skip to New York to Bruno. I know he has to go to an investors meeting, I think, soon. Now, Bruno, you are co-founder and CEO of 28 Health, and our question for you is: how can Belgium learn from the United States startup ecosystem, such as New York?
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and thanks for the flexibility on timing. So, and just so you know, 28 Health, we are an online platform providing telemedicine and medication delivery for women's health. So people get the context. I never started a company in Belgium, so I can just speak about 3 things that I particularly like about the US startup ecosystem. I think the first one, we talked about access to capital, but for me, especially like early stage access, I think there's a ton of angels and early stage VCs that truly understand that early stage investing is about making bets in strong teams with great ideas, and that don't expect kind of S&P 500 type of returns. They expect that 1 in 20 will do incredibly well and 19 will go bankrupt, and that's fine. 2, I think, as Julien said, I think just the supportive culture of starting a company is both, I think the general population and employers in the US are very supportive of people who take risks and start companies. And then first of all, it creates a really great environment. But I think second of all, it decreases the risk of starting your own company, because that worst case can happen is it's going to go bankrupt. You will have learned a ton and you'll probably find a great job at Google or elsewhere. And I think that, at least for me personally, was a big reason to take the leap of faith. And I think the last one is talent. There's a ton of people really interested in startups, and I think a lot of the top talent understand the risk, but also the upside of joining early stage companies. And that helps us attract top talent even when you're at the earliest stage. So those are 3 of the many aspects I liked about the US.
Bruno, thank you very much. And now we will go from New York to Silicon Valley again. And our next speaker will be Benjamin, co-founder and CIO of Treasure Financial.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, pleasure to be talking to you all today from San Francisco, California. I think echoing a little bit what Julian mentioned, one thing which is very particular to the Bay Area and the Silicon Valley is, I would say, like the dynamism of people and also the ability and interest on taking on big challenges. So if you take a step back, all the big product, or like a majority of the big product that we all commonly use related to tech will be like your iPhone, Netflix, Google, even like Facebook, all come from the Silicon Valley. And I think that is something very important to remember. And I think that comes for a reason. It's because I think one, access of great engineers and also great access to product people were able to build very, very interesting products. So for me, it's very much that is just being part of an environment which is very conducive on building very interesting products which are related to very strong customer use case.
Great, thank you very much, Benjamin. And next up we have Gaetan, founder and CEO of Addictive Health and the Health Tech Growth Network. He's also CMO of Tribune Health.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Great to be in good company, obviously, today. I've been in California for 25 years almost. I was here for 3 years. And as we all know, it always gets longer. So what we do is really support, actually, a lot of European companies get set up in the US, expand their operations, raise money, validate their product roadmap, all the way through commercial uptake and exit. So that's in a nutshell what the firm is doing. The question is really about the Silicon Valley and what our Belgian entrepreneurs can learn from it. I'm in Southern California. I was up there for a while and came back down to San Diego for obvious reasons. cost of living. Julia mentioned that we've worked together in the past. Great guy, great company as well. But in general, about California more broadly than Silicon Valley, one is vision. I think we can in Belgium think bigger and put fear aside, and also put fear of failure and judgment aside as well. Belgians tend to be very conservative-minded and somewhat shy, and definitely not as expanded in terms of vision as Americans may do. So fear aside. Two is action. Not wait until everything seems to be perfect and double check to actually try something. Try, win or don't. If you fail, modify and try again. That's really something that incremental improvements are way better than waiting too long for sometimes the opportunity that may be passing us. Three is dynamics. We talked about the ecosystem in California and in the Valley. Very important. So it's really aggressively build and leverage a network of like-minded people to be able to accelerate progress. The next point is something we've discussed extensively today is funding. The average value of a company in California compared to a value in Europe is being calculated to be 2.2 to 3.2 times higher for the same venture when you do raise money in the US. And that is something that obviously seems to be very attractive. That's the reason why a lot of Europeans and Belgians in particular want to find money in the US, but there's a lot of caveats to that. It's not as easy as it seems, as Julia mentioned. Yes, dollars on paper seem to be very, very attractive, but conditions attached are pretty stringent. And you have to be operational in the US. You have to be to prove that you do have a roadmap that makes sense. It's basically very attractive to think big, but again, there's other aspects to it as well. And the last point I want to make is to never give up. I've built multiple ventures here in the US since 1998. It's been a long time. Not everything works out. I was very lucky to be somewhat successful in some of these ventures. But the point is, as long as you focus on what the whole goal and dream is, fight for it, and something will work out. So that's basically my 2 cents, as seen from San Diego.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Folks, now we have our final section. We've already heard from Bruno because he has to go, but this is Startup America. So when we think of startups in the United States, we just think of Silicon Valley most of the time, but there's a lot of startups in other parts of the country too, including New York, Georgia, so on and so forth. So our speakers in this section will be Bridget, President of the Belgian American Chamber of the South. Bridget is also co-founder and CEO of SIBA. The next speaker, I'm Irish, so if I get the pronunciation wrong, I'm sorry. Diedrich Vermeulen, co-founder and CEO of CFox. Then we'll have Christopher, founder of The Zig, and finally Martin, co-founder of Loop Earplugs. So Bridget, we have you next. Welcome.
Very nice, again, everybody, to see you. I'm going to talk as president of the Belgian American Chamber of Commerce and also as SIBA. Now, always, why should you choose the United States? Sky is the limit. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the South. People always think, oh, the South, it's much more exotic to go to Boston, New York, or California. Absolutely. But don't forget, the South has the 5th biggest GDP in the world. So Georgia, if you take Georgia, South, and North Carolina, why? We have an amazing infrastructure. Just think about the ports, Savannah, Charleston, Delta, the transportation. If you fly within 2 hours, you have 80% of the American market. So don't just think about, the other parts, north or more west. The other really important thing is the tax incentives that, we have here in the South. Everybody remembers, Georgia was not even on the map, for the entertainment world, movies, films. But now, we're surpassed Hollywood, again, thanks to tax incentives on the level of Georgia. Talent pool, amazing colleges here in the South. More and more, we're getting on the map. Georgia Tech, UGA, labor laws, obviously, if you're coming from Belgium, unions are pretty strong, present, and here not in the South. So at the end of the day, I run, and I started here a company, Pelman Industries, for 20 years. the lessons that I've learned, and now with my new startup, Cyber, that is in the cyber insurance companies, yes, the sky's the limit, absolutely. You have to have good luck. But if you don't give up, you really can realize, because you have all the tools that are available. A lot of times I've heard, like, for example, from Gaten or for instance of Anke, there is amazing access to money. It's maybe not as easy here in the South, but it is, present. So yes, sky's the limit, and definitely, New York, Boston, California, but the South is also. Please take that in consideration when you come.
Thank you so much, Bridget. And next up, again, I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. We have Diedrich. You are co-founder and CEO of CFox.
Yeah, we're a health tech company, and we're using photonic chips to make the ultimate wearable for biological observability. And we decided to make our headquarters in Boston since it's the biggest biotech hub in the world. And then we joined Y Combinator. We pitched 200 investors over Zoom during the pandemic. And that allowed us to raise $10 million in our seed round. So interestingly, the majority of that funding didn't come from the East Coast, but from West Coast VCs and from European VCs, actually. So yeah, the post-pandemic reality is that you don't need to be physically present in a region to get funding but if you're a hardware company, go to the place wherever you can hire the best people in your industry, or where you have the best network to hire amazing people. If you're a software company, personally, I would go fully remote and asynchronous, which then allows you to hire anyone from anywhere in the world. Many successful startups right now are doing this. And in the end, a startup is just an entity with a binary outcome. Either you're going to make it or not. So you have to structure your business with that perspective in mind. Don't be afraid. Either you're going to be $1 billion company or you're going to fail. So anything in between is not interesting. It's not interesting for employees either, and it's not interesting for VCs, especially for West Coast VCs. I would advise to join American Startup Accelerator like Y Combinator, and as a CEO, you should spend at least half of your time networking in the US.
Okay, thank you so much. Really, really good advice in only a couple of minutes. So next up we have Christopher. And Christopher, you are founder of The Zig, and I believe you're in Washington State, right?
So my name is Chris Chileshe, founder of The Zig, and I'm just going to post in the chat for everyone to see sort of what we're working on. So The Zig is primarily a professional services and software engineering company. But we have a product division which is focused on building 2 key products right now. And what I would say about coming to the US as a startup, I think there's a lot of good points that were raised sort of in the California segment. And so you end up being a little bit repetitive because it does apply more broadly to the rest of the US. But one of the things I think is that particularly resonated with me was a culture in the US around American companies. So American companies are a little bit more, I feel, they're more willing to take risks and try products. They're more willing to change their processes and sort of experiment. And so it's a great place to come because your product will get tested by someone. It may not necessarily resonate, but it's easier to sort of find an audience to entertain something that you're doing that might be new. And so as opposed to sort of a more conservative company culture where things don't move and aren't as nimble, I think American companies are willing to sort of like take a risk on a startup and try a new product that may disappear. So I think that's one area where you benefit from coming to the US. The second, which everybody has mentioned multiple times, is ecosystems. There's a huge support network in the US, in particular for startups. I think there's a lot of muscle memory built here around supporting startups, around centering entire economies on startups as well, and small businesses. And so you find an ecosystem both from a legislative perspective and just generally an economic perspective that's supportive of entrepreneurs. It's a very, very lonely road. It can be tough to be an entrepreneur, and you find a lot of peers in the US who are willing to sort of like help you make connections and help you establish your business. So I think generally speaking, it's just a very, very pro startup, pro business environment that I would encourage anybody to come to.
Christopher, thank you so much. And then we have our final speaker, who is Martin. And Martin, you are from Loop Earplugs.
Yeah, correct. I'm from Loop Earplugs. Maybe a little bit of background. Our HQ is based in Antwerp, but I moved to New York about 10 months ago. So we have some people in New York, and we also have some people in Hong Kong, Shenzhen. So what I'm going to focus on, we're a D2C brand, so direct to consumer. So I kind of listed the things that are most important to us as a D2C direct to consumer brand. I think for me, number one is the size of the market, the US market. As an example, we have 50% of our sales from Amazon, 50% on Shopify. Getting a large volume of sales on Amazon US is way easier than getting sales on Amazon US, on Germany, UK, France, because these markets have different languages. They're way more fragmented. So that's also why for us, almost 60 or 70% of our sales is coming from the US. And that's because of that, huge markets. The same for your website. If you want to do SEO, you have to do that in all different languages, German, Dutch, and whatever. In the US, that's way more easy. So I think that's, I would say, is number one, the biggest thing for us. The second thing I would say is I was part of Startup KBC, a lot of great companies there. But if you look at the number of D2C companies, there were not that many. If you look at the US, New York, there's so many different conferences. There's Grow New York, there's Commerce Next, there's Shop Talk. We even have a Shopify store in New York. So just the community of D2C brands is a lot larger. So that's also very interesting from our side. And next to that, you have some of the top, let's say, D2C companies that are based in New York. I'm thinking of an Allbirds, a Warby Parker, in a way. So it's much easier to meet, let's say, some of the founders in New York. And you also see that they're kind of ahead of the curve in terms of marketing. For example, when you think of SMS marketing in the US, in New York, it's very normal. In Europe, it's not done at all. So you kind of see some of those trends happening a bit before in New York, and you see them coming in Belgium or in Europe. The fourth thing for me is inspiration. If you're walking around in New York, you see all the cool stores, how Nike does their store, how Adidas does their store, how you have those D2C brands that are bringing their experience into stores as well. You have so many billboards, so many impulses, so you really see for you what kind of stands out. So it's kind of immersion into different brands. And the last thing is also, I would say, we're very strong in, let's say, the nightlife community and in the noise sensitivity community. And those communities, like the word of mouth, is very, very strong over there. It's very vocal. If they like something, they're going to tell a lot of people, and that word spreads quite quickly. So I think for me, those are kind of the 5 top things for us at D2C brand that are kind of interesting in being in New York and in the US.
Hey, Martin, thank you very much for closing our event. I really appreciate it. So folks, that is the end of our conference. And I just want to say a final shout out to our sponsors, Amplitude, Twilio, and Freshworks for Startups. I've shared a link to our Discord forum, and this is really good. Nearly 300 members have joined in only an hour and a half. Discord is a lot like Slack. It's a lot better, probably not as popular, but it has far more capabilities in terms of having a forum, connecting people with each other. If you join the forum, you'll be able to connect not just for 90 minutes, but for 365 days a year with our speakers, with other Belgian startups and investors. So you're more than welcome to join. And finally, as I mentioned, I'm currently in Dublin, but I will be going to Belgium for the first time in 10 years. On April 14th and 15th for meetups in Brussels and Antwerp. It's going to be very relaxed. We're going to have a few drinks in an Irish pub. We're going to get to know each other. And if anybody wants to meet up during the day, just to chat about startups or potential opportunities, just let me know, and it will be a pleasure to see you in person. Again, our sponsors and speakers, if you want to check them out, just go to startupnetwork.eu/Belgium, and they are Amplitude, Twilio, and Freshworks for Startups. They made the event possible. So did all the speakers. Thank you all so much, and have a nice week, everyone. See you in Brussels and in Antwerp.